We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast, brought to you by our great friends at Alumni Hall. Make sure to check them out, guys, for all your 2025 Georgia football game day gear and accessory needs, your tailgating gear needs. They got you guys covered. But with the 2025 season now rapidly bearing down on us, it's time to make some bold predictions about Georgia football's 2025 season. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here on today's episode. But before we get there, guys, if you are one of those diehard Georgia fans, and I hope you are if you're watching this channel, because everything that we do here is designed for all you Georgia diehards, go ahead, subscribe right now, turn those notifications on. We did just hit my initial goal of 3,000 subscribers by the time the season started. We've moved past that, and the new goal is 3,500. So thank you for everyone who has subscribed and helped me out there. And any other help from any of you guys out there that haven't subscribed is certainly greatly appreciated. So like, subscribe, comment, all that great stuff. I do certainly appreciate all you guys out there. But all right, so this is about the time of year where you start to see all these bold predictions be thrown out there all over the place. And look, I've done it in the past myself. I've been doing it for years on this podcast because it's a fun episode to do at this point in the offseason as the season's like right there, but still far enough away to where we're just like, oh my God, we need football in our lives. But honestly, guys, it's kind of gotten out of hand to this point. Admittedly, it's gotten out of hand. I remember doing my bold predictions episode last year and it was like, well, yeah, I'm trying to make these predictions be things I think could really happen, but the idea of what is a bold prediction has now just kind of gotten to the point of where people are just competing to throw out as wild of a take as they possibly can. It's gotten to the point where like the term bold has just become a euphemism for how absurd can you possibly get with your predictions. So what you've gotten recently, at least what I keep seeing, I've read a number of these, national predictions, Georgia predictions, whatever, and almost all of them at this point are just like completely untethered to reality. Like 99% of them just have essentially zero chance of even remotely happening. So at this point, I've just gotten to where I think like the idea of like a bold prediction, at least in terms of what bold predictions have become by and large, it's just kind of become an exercise that doesn't have all that much value. People just throwing out like wild, absurd, crazy takes. And yeah, again, I myself have been guilty of that in the past. I'm not immune to that. But I'm a reformed man, guys. I'm a reformed man. I've changed my ways. I value your time too much to waste it with nonsense. I'm not going to do that today. So yes, I do have predictions for you. I have 10 predictions about this Georgia football team today, at least that are Georgia football adjacent. Almost all of them are like directly Georgia football because that's what we do here on this channel. So I'm going to throw those 10 predictions at you. But I want to make sure you all understand my goal and how I'm approaching this today, all right? I'm not trying to be as outlandish as possible, right? I'm not going to get into the competition of like how wild of a take can you throw out there? Just how bold can you go, okay? Like I want some of these to be bold. I do think a number of them are fairly bold, but I'm going to give you 10 predictions that I do truly believe in, and I really believe are going to happen, at least have a very good chance of happening this year. And these are predictions that I can and will back up here on the show today. Now, some are certainly more bold than others, right? That's kind of how these things go. So I am going to break my 10 predictions into 3 tiers, right? I've got the barely bold, I've got the getting bolder tier, and then I've got the legit bold tier, okay? So that's how I'm going to break things down. So let's start off nice and easy here. I think a lot of you will probably agree with this first category, the barely bold predictions. I'm not going way out there, but these are 3 predictions, 3 things that I do believe are going to happen this year, all right? So let's start off with a nice easy group here. Number 1, my first barely bold prediction for the 2025 Georgia football team is that cornerback Ellis Robinson will be starting at corner opposite Dalen Everett, not taking Dalen's job. Dalen's a dude, but will be starting that cornerback position opposite Dalen by the Florida game. And that might be a little late. It might happen earlier than that, but I'm going to be safe here. Okay, these are just barely bold. We're just getting started. We're dipping our toes into these bold prediction, guys. But I do think that Ellis Robinson will eventually overtake Daniel Harris for that job and become the guy for Georgia by essentially midseason. For me, like I know it's not technically midseason, but I've always kind of viewed the Florida game in late October, I guess this year it's early November, as kind of that mid-ish season point for Georgia. So that's what I'm going with my first prediction. Guys, look, I don't expect Ellis to necessarily start week 1. I don't think that's the case. Now, I thought about going there and say, oh, you know what? Let's just say Ellis Robinson is going to start week 1. And that very well might happen, but I'm not convinced that will happen. I'm not as sure that will be the case as I am Ellis taking that job based on his performance by the time we get to the Florida game. So again, I'm not trying to go like wild out there. I'm trying, especially with the barely bold category, I'm trying to give you guys things that I truly do believe in. And I believe more that Ellis Robinson will at least start by the Florida game, okay? Hey, look, I don't dislike any of our players. I love all of our guys. I want the best player to play. And I do think Daniel Harris is a good player, and I think he's got some real potential in his game. And I do think he was an upgrade over what we saw from Julian Humphrey, who was just lost in space out there, guys. Always in phase pretty much all the time, but just had absolutely zero ball skills. The dude just could not find the ball in the air. Like we know that, I talk about that all the time. Just can't. He couldn't find the ball. Daniel Harris was better in that regard. We kind of took over that job with the last 4 games I think he started last year. He was better in that regard, but still not what I would like to see. And that's been an issue for the Georgia cornerbacks for a while. You can go back to like, look, I don't want to slander anybody, but Kelee Ringo, great. He was a really good player for us, right? And like we all, like he'll go down in Georgia lore forever with that like final pick 6 in the national championship game in 2021. We all love Kelee, but Kelee, had his issues at times with ball skills, finding the ball in the air. Great athlete, pretty much like Humphrey, in phase most of the time, just when the ball's in the air, like making plays in the ball, it wasn't always his game, right? And so we've had those issues at times. Dalen Everett has had those issues at times in his career, but he's gotten much better. He really turned a corner there last year. Obviously, Kamari Lassiter was great. He's the best we've had in a while. But I don't think Daniel Harris is quite to that point yet. Now, maybe he's improved his game throughout the offseason, getting all those reps to the ones. Maybe. Hopefully, that'd be awesome. Again, I just want the best guy to play. But one thing that Ellis Robinson brings to the table is elite ball skills. I didn't see the scrimmage, but what I was told from a number of sources out there that were watching it made a ridiculous highlight reel. I told you guys this earlier in the week, a highlight reel interception, which is just surprising to me. You saw that on his high school tape. I saw it last year with my own 2 eyes at the fall camp practice I was able to go to, and that was as a true freshman. I told you guys he made an interception. If you didn't see that episode, he made a pick in that fall camp practice last year where he's falling backwards, literally off the ground, feet are off the ground, falling backwards, one hands it, brings his body, and it's almost like full extension. Crazy stuff. So he's got wild ball skills. I do think he's one of the better, maybe the best cover guy on the team. The issue for him has always been physicality, right? And Kirby spoke about that after the scrimmage. And Kirby's take, and this kind of echoed what I've been hearing about Ellis, is that he's gotten bigger, gotten stronger. He's become more physical out there. And it's not that he can't be physical on the perimeter, but he's still not consistent there. And I think that's what's going to hold him back from opening the season as the starter there. I think they're going to want to see it in live games, him do it consistently, and I'm pretty confident he will. I think at this point, Ellis is very well aware that what held him back last year, what kept him from getting on the field consistently, or really much at all, was the lack of physicality, and they're concerned about that in the perimeter screen game, perimeter run game, right? And that's something that our coaches demand, okay? I think he's aware of that. So this guy is was a former big-time high school recruit, number 2 player in the country coming out of the 2024 class. He's got his eyes set on the NFL, probably after year 3, and he knows if that's going to happen at Georgia, he's going to have to play with more physicality, certainly when he gets in the game. So I think you'll see that from him, and his ball skills they're ridiculous, guys. He's out of control with his ball skills. So I think that you're going to probably have at least a 2-man, maybe a 3-man rotation if you want to throw Daniel Harris and DeMello Jones out there to start the season. I love DeMello too. I think DeMello's really good. But I think Ellis is he's a different level, just a notch up in terms of his coverage ability, his ball skills. And if he just goes out there and plays with some physicality, I think if he proves that to the coaches, they can trust him in the physical part of that position, that he will eventually earn that job. And it might happen sooner rather than later, but I'm going to go at least by the Florida game. All right, prediction number 2. I've got Juan Gaston, offensive lineman, true freshman, will be the first member of Georgia's 2025 recruiting class to start a game this year. And if you listen to my first episode of the week, recapping the first week and a half of fall camp, the first half of fall camp, and what went down in the scrimmage, I told you guys, one of the things that probably surprised me the most, it did surprise me the most coming out of the scrimmage, at least in terms of what I was told, was that Juan Gaston actually opened the scrimmage as the number 1 right guard with the number 1 offense. Not necessarily shocking, because if you go back to the spring, he did work some of the ones at right guard. That was after Daniel Calhoun went down with injury. He was kind of working back and forth there, splitting reps with the ones with Michael Uini. But I was of the impression, in coming into fall camp, that he would be behind both Calhoun and Uini, who are both like rising like second-year players, so redshirt freshmen. And it was Michael Uini who opened fall camp, like the first day of fall camp, going out there with the number one offense at right guard. You do the scrimmage, and all of a sudden it's Juan Gaston. Now, we still have another half of fall camp to go, so we'll see there. But as of right now, as of what I was recently told, as of like Saturday, he is working with the number one offense. Now, does that mean that he is going to open the season as the starter at right guard? I don't know that yet, because like there's some competition there. Like, it's a heated competition between those three guys. It's really close between Calhoun and Uini and Juan Gaston. And Kirby's right. Juan, the thing about him coming out of high school is the dude had to get his body in shape. He had some bad weight. He was out of shape. To his credit, he did a really good job in the spring, the first couple months on campus, of getting his body in shape, getting his weight down. Still had a ways to go before we got to the season. So he went to the summer after the spring and got his body in better shape. But he still has a little bit of weight to go. He's lost about 30 or so pounds since he got to campus, which is great. He still needs to get down a little bit so that he can sustain longer. But even though if he might not start week one, he's going to play. He is going to be in a rotation. He's also probably our number 3 tackle right now. I mean, you've got Ernest Green at right tackle. You got Monroe Freeling at left tackle. But Juan is also repping at tackle. He's a dude. He is a dude. Now, if he gets his body in shape, which I feel like he's going to, he's trending in that direction, he's probably going to start a game this year. And if you think, I hope to God we don't have the injury situation we had last year. Even if he doesn't start week one, the first time there's an injury at guard or tackle, he's going to be the next guy up, right? But it might not even come to that. I think he absolutely could earn a starting job. It might be week one against Marshall. If not, he's going to rotate, and there'll probably be a competition that carries in the season between him and Uini and Calhoun. And if he performs at a higher level than those two guys early in the year, he could easily take one of those jobs. We've seen that before. So that's my prediction, guys. If you look at the rest of the players in that class, it's a great class, man. Number 2 class in the country. Bo Walker doing big things. Talon Taylor doing big things at receiver. C.J. Wiley. We got a number of players. J.J. Hanna doing some big things during the scrimmage on Saturday, and it really has had a strong start to fall camp. But in terms of starting, those guys are really good, and they're going to play. I don't see them starting right now. I think Juan Gaston is the closest to that. So a barely bold prediction there that Juan Gaston will be the first member of this freshman class to start a game for Georgia in 2025. And number 3, I'll still categorize this as a barely bold prediction. I love Dalen Everett, guys. I love him. I had questions about Dalen. Certainly his first year as a starter back in 2023. First half of last year wasn't necessarily great or elite. Second half of last year, right about the Texas game, the first Texas game on the road in Austin, the dude started to turn a corner. And obviously, he had the interception against Texas. He had the cat corner blitz and the forced fumble, and I think he actually recovered that fumble as well, if I remember correctly. And that performance in that game, I think it boosted his confidence. And from that point on, he took his game to a different level. He was a different player the second half of last year than he was the first half of last year, and certainly in 2023, okay? So I loved what I saw from him. I think he's got all the tools that he needs to be an elite corner at the college level. 6'1", 190, good size, really good athlete, incredibly physical on the outside. That's what got him that job. We had a bunch of guys that were contending for jobs. You go back to A.J. Harris even. A.J. Harris, Julian Humphrey, Daniel Harris. They were competing for a job, right, in 2023. But it was Dalen who was the guy out there more consistently. Why? Because he was more physical. Again, going back to what I said about Ellis Robinson, our coaches demand that. And that's something that Dalen Everett brings to the table. He could easily play star for us with his size, his profile, his physicality. But he's also turned himself into a really, really good cover corner. So I think Dalen's going to have a monster year. I think he's going to have an all-SEC caliber year. I thought about just saying, hey, Dalen Everett's going to be all-SEC first team. But I'm going to go a little further than that. Dalen Everett will turn himself into a first-round NFL draft pick with his performance in 2025. I believe that, guys. I think Dalen Everett is going to be a first-rounder. And I know that's not the boldest thing ever. Again, that's why he's in the barely bold category. But if you look at a lot of those mock drafts out there, he's not like seeing University as a first-round guy right now. I think that's going to change. I think that will change fairly early this season based on what I think Dalen Everett's going to do for Georgia. Love the guy. Very high on him. Don't forget, he was a big-time 5-star guy. Took him a little while to kind of get get out there and kind of get his feet under him and really kind of grow and develop. But I think he's done that. He's gone through the growing pains, going to year 3 as a starter for Georgia, that cornerback spot. One of the leaders in our defense. The dude's going to have a huge year. I do think he will turn himself into a first-round draft pick this year. All right, so that was my barely bold category. Let's move on. Let's get a little bolder. So these are my getting bolder predictions. All right, coming in number 4, I got Georgia finishing inside the top 2 in the SEC in rush defense in 2025. We weren't great against the run last year, guys. Part of that was a function of schedule, okay? We did play some teams that run the football really well. And some of that, our rushing numbers from a year ago were really skewed by a couple of games, in particular Georgia Tech, and also UMass ran for over 200, which is like, what are we doing? Alabama ran for almost 200 yards in that game, has a lot of success, certainly in the first half of that game. And I've said it many times, when you think about Georgia's run game, our run defense from a year ago, the issue was not really so much physical, okay? Now, we were banged up in the front on the defensive line for half the year, and we're playing like 3 guys for the first third of the season. That certainly complicated things. A guy like Michael Williams was never fully healthy last year. Came back and played, but he wasn't his 100% version of himself all last year. That hurts when you're talking about like a top 10 NFL draft pick caliber player. But more than anything, and this goes back to 2023 also, it's eyes, discipline. Misdirection killed us, guys. Teams that had quarterbacks that were a factor in the run game murdered us in the run game. That's why UMass ran all over us, guys. It wasn't UMass just lining up and like owning us and just pushing our defense around. That wasn't what happened. They had a quarterback that could run the football. And that type of scheme with a misdirection involved in a number game, because we like to play the 2 high safety show. We really do not like bringing safeties in the box if we can avoid that, right? Because we want to maintain that structural integrity on the back end so we don't get beat vertically down the field. We really want to limit explosive play opportunities in the pass game. And I love that, right? And traditionally under Kirby Smart, that's been fine because we've been so good in the front 6 that we can stifle teams' run games. That's why Tennessee can never score more than 17 points against Georgia and Josh Heupel when they're just dropping like 40 and 50 burgers on everybody else, because we can stop their run game, at least contain their run game with even numbers in the box, keep 2 high safeties back there, and we make it very difficult for them to get the one-on-one opportunities that they covet, that they exploit against other teams, right? Well, okay, that's great. We normally do that. But when we have teams that run the football with the quarterback, that now creates a problem. It looks like it's even numbers, but it's not, right? Because the quarterback's a ball carrier. They're either optioning off somebody in the defense, thereby taking the numbers, or they're using the running back as a lead blocker, thereby taking back numbers. And sometimes they're optioning off and using the running back. And now you got like a +2 scenario. It's tough to handle from a number standpoint. That's part of it. The other part is just a lack of discipline. Just not watching our keys, maybe not knowing who our keys are and trying to do someone else's job, right? I talk about this a ton. The example I always use is Alabama last year. Malachi Starks had him schemed up one-on-one, contain on the outside to contain Jalen Milroe if he pulled the football. That was his job on a critical third or fourth down. And he takes one false step inside on the mesh. That's all Jalen Milroe needs. He pulls it. He's too fast, too explosive around the corner for Malachi to be able to recover. As good of an athlete as Malachi was, touchdown. All right, touchdown. So love Malachi. It's not me trying to kill Malachi, but those are the kind of things that killed our defense a year ago. And we put a number of teams that could exploit us with that QB run game, with Alabama and Jalen Milroe, UMass, Tech, a couple others, right? Auburn to a degree. Like Peyton Thorne is not a dynamic runner, but a functional runner, and they certainly use him. We saw that in 2023. If you look at Georgia's schedule this year, there's not as many teams that I think are going to pose as much of an issue for us with the QB run game. Alabama, Ty Simpson's now been named their starter. He's a good athlete, and they will use the QB run game with him, but he's not the same level athlete as Jalen Milroe. So I'm hopeful, especially after getting killed by Milroe 2 years in a row, that we have an answer for Alabama's QB run game. I hope to God. If not, then we might not win that football game, because that's what's killed us. Jalen Milroe almost like single-handedly beat us with his ability to run the football. It just completely screwed up our defense and our leverage, and our eyes are all over the place. Just tough. So yeah, he's mobile. Simpson's mobile, but he's not the same kind of guy as Milroe. So hopefully that will, and obviously we get that game at home, right? So I think that does help to a degree. Texas, yeah, you got Arch Manning, who's certainly more mobile than Quinn Ewers, but how much are they going to use in the QB run game? Like, they'll use him situationally for sure. He's too good of an athlete not to. But do you want to risk getting that guy hurt? Like, you're the Manning. I don't know how much of a factor he'll be in the run game. We'll see. I do think Austin Simmons will be a part of their run game. They always run the quarterback at Ole Miss. Tech, we know what they have. They're going to run the football. So we have some teams on the schedule that do run the quarterback. I just don't know if we have as many, and I don't know if they're going to be as dynamic running the football as some of those teams were a year ago. And I also do think beyond that, beyond the schedule and who we're playing, we now have some legit vets at linebacker. Some of the guys that are getting victimized most commonly with the poor eyes the past couple of years were Raylan Wilson, certainly. I love Raylan. I think he's an awesome athlete. I think the sky's the limit for him as an inside linebacker. But the dude has had issues at times with discipline out there, really, like with his eyes and following his keys and getting full misdirection. That's been a problem. When he knows what to do, the dude is awesome. Like against Texas last year, I think he has 2 best games against Texas. Why? Because they do some misdirection in their offense, but not with the QB run game. And it wasn't as much of an issue for him. C.J. Allen was much improved in that regard last year. Did get victimized at times in 2023 as a freshman. He fell victim to that quite a bit, which happens with true freshmen, right? So I think we have a lot of veterans at linebacker who play a lot of football for us, so that's going to help. I also think that we are much deeper and better up front on the defensive line. I believe that, guys. I know we're losing Michael Williams. I get that, man. I know we're losing Jalen Walker. But Jalen Walker, he was good against the run, but that was not especially. He was a pass rusher extraordinaire. I love what we have on the interior. I love Christian Miller. We might get to him a little bit later on. I think that guy could work himself into maybe a first-round draft pick conversation. I really like Xavier McLeod. I think that guy could have a breakout year for Georgia in year 2 in our system. He was awesome for us in spot duty down the stretch of the season when Christian Miller went down with injury. Very disruptive player. Can give you some pass rush as well. I think Jordan Hall is going to have a really big bounce-back year after his season being derailed by injury last year. I'm excited about him. You got Elijah Griffin, number 1 defensive tackle in the country coming out. I know he's a freshman, but I think he's the next great Georgia interior defensive lineman. I love what we have. I think we also have some legit zero-tech nose guards. Jordan, to a degree, but behind him, you got Nnamdi Ogboko, Nazir Johnson, both guys 340-plus pounds. Those are guys that we absolutely recruited to play that position. I think they're going to help there, be some space eaters, take up double teams, and that's what we need, guys. We need players up front to eat up double teams so that our linebackers can run free. One of the other issues we've had in recent years, certainly last year against the run, was we've had more bodies on our linebackers because we hadn't had guys up front eating those blocks. Nazir Stackhouse, love the guy, just wasn't necessarily that guy eating double teams. Did a good job of anchoring for us, but wasn't commanding double teams the way that Jordan Davis was. He just wasn't, okay? It just is what it is. And so what that means is you have more bodies at the second level, getting our linebackers' faces, making it harder for them to get downhill and make the play at the line of scrimmage. The way that guys like Roquan Smith did, and the way that guys like Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker did, right? So I do think that's going to help as well. So I love what we have in the interior. I like what we have on the edges. I really like Gabe Harris. I'm hearing great things about Joseph Jonah-Janye, obviously JJ Anna. I know that he's a true freshman, but I think we're good there, guys. So I do think that Georgia will finish inside the top 2 in the SEC in rush defense in 2025. The reason I didn't say number 1, initially I had it, Georgia will finish atop the SEC in rush defense in 2025. I backed off that because, again, I'm trying to give you guys things I believe. I backed off that because Texas is also really good in their front 6. And Texas' schedule, guys, is a freaking joke. They play, I think, arguably the teams I think will be the 4 worst teams in the league. They play Mississippi State, they play Arkansas, they play Vanderbilt, and they play Kentucky. How on earth do you get that schedule? I mean, dear Lord, talk about rolling the red carpet out. Again, I know it's the same thing as last year, just flipped. But when you get those 4 teams, I mean, those teams aren't going to do anything against Texas's defense. So they're just going to stack up stats based on their schedule. So I think Texas will probably be finished number 1, and I'll go Georgia right behind Texas. Not too far behind them. I think our schedule is just tougher than Texas's. So, and that matters. When you talk about imbalanced schedules now with these super conferences, that certainly has to factor into the equation. All right, coming in at number 5, I've got Gunnar Stockton will lead the SEC in yards per passing attempt. Okay, yards per attempt. That's my next getting bolder prediction. Now, I know that there's some Stetson doubters out there. I hear you. I understand, guys. Look, we all want to see it out there in live settings like we saw a little bit at the end of last year. We want to see where Gunnar is now. All I can tell you is what I've seen from Gunnar. Every time I've seen him, he's gotten better and better and better. I'm a believer in Gunnar Stockton, okay? Until he gives me a reason not to, I'm a believer. He keeps giving me reasons to believe in him. Now, do I think that Gunnar will necessarily be like the best quarterback in the SEC? That's not what I'm saying, guys. Maybe. There's a world where that's possible, but we have some good quarterbacks in the league. You got Arch Manning, you got Garrett Nussmeier. Like, there's some good players out there, right? So I'm not saying he's going to be the best quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be the guy that's drafted highest of all the quarterbacks in the SEC this year. But I do think that there's a very real chance that he will lead the SEC in yards per passing attempt. Guys, Stetson Bennett led the SEC in that category, yards per attempt, in 2021. Do you know where Stetson finished in passing yards per game in that same season? 11th in the league. So again, I'm not telling you that Gunner's going to go out there and throw for 300 yards a game. That's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you when we go to the air that Gunner and our passing offense are going to be as explosive, more explosive than any other offense out there in the SEC. So again, like Stetson, literally, he led the SEC. I think it's like 10 yards per attempt in 2021, had like barely over 200 passing yards per game. So first in yards per attempt, 11th in passing yards per games. And that might be, I think Gunner's going to throw for more than 204 yards a game. I do think that. But he's probably not going to lead the SEC. Might not even be in the top 3, might not be in the top 5 in the SEC in passing yards per game. But yards per attempt, yeah, I believe that. Here's why, guys. I believe that we're going to see this Georgia offense return to its roots. What do I mean by that? I think we're going to establish a physical downhill rushing attack and then attack vertically down the field off of play action, and we're going to hit some explosive plays down the field, guys. That's Kirby Smart Georgia football 101. Run the football, establish that physical brand of downhill running, and then you work vertical shots off of play action off that. That is how we won a national title in 2021. Yeah, defense played a big part in that too, but offensively, that's what we did. How did Stetson Bennett lead the SEC in yards per attempt in 2021? That exact formula. And I believe with Gunner Stockton at quarterback, with his ability to run the football, that is what we're going back to, guys. I'm telling you, that has been a major emphasis of this team going back to the spring. They are clearly not happy with how poorly we ran the ball last year. They know that ain't Georgia football. They are going to get back to their roots. And you have a quarterback that I think fits that, with his ability to run the football and also his accuracy down the field. I know it's a small sample size, guys, in real games. But in that small sample size, we saw him throw the football down the field with more accuracy than Carson Beck ever did. Carson Beck was awesome between the hashes, about 15 to 20 yards down the field. Middle of the field, lethal. Outside the hashes, vertically, nah, that was not Carson's game. Never was, man. How many times do you see guys streaking open down the field wide open, and Carson overthrows them, throws it too far inside, throws it too far outside, or if they complete it, he underthrows it, which, hey, I'd rather you underthrow than overthrow because at least it's completed, but it should have been a walk-in touchdown, still like a 40-yard gain, but instead of a walk-in touchdown, now you're inside the red zone at the 10-yard line, now you got to try to score a touchdown in the red zone, which is tough to do, right? So Gunner has shown me, whether it's games also in practice during the spring, G-Day, he's a better downfield passer, right? So if that is our identity, run the football, establish that, play action, vertical shots down the field, we got a quarterback that can do that, right? And then beyond that, we now have some legit explosive weapons outside. We went out and addressed that issue. We dramatically improved our receiver core. We have far more explosive weapons on the outside, in the slot, at running back, at tight end. We have dudes out there, guys. So that's also going to contribute to the explosiveness of the pass game, taking a big step this year. And we're also like, we run RPOs, certainly. We did like all the screens everybody hated last year. Like they weren't called screens. They're RPOs that are tagged to runs primarily. Like we run some just called screens, we would. But most of those are RPOs because we had trouble running the football and we didn't have a quarterback that could take back the numbers when teams loaded the box. So what was our answer? Our answer was to go RPO game, and it was like a lot of that was the screen stuff. So we run them, but we're not as RPO heavy as like a team like Ole Miss traditionally is, right? So, and I say that because when you go RPOs, oftentimes those are like glance routes. And yeah, can you break those like Alabama did back in 2020 with Devontae Smith? Yeah, you can, but by and large, those aren't going to be as explosive plays. So I think that will factor in, which is going to take more shots down the field. And also, like I know G-Day is G-Day. It's a scrimmage. It's not even a glorified scrimmage. It is a scrimmage. And we're not out there showing our full offense. We're out there trying to put on a show for the fans, right? So you do throw the ball more in G-Day than you normally would. You don't run the ball as much, right? But one thing that I saw there, and I don't want to read too much into it, but I do take something away from it. When we were out there offensively, especially the number one offense, really any offense, but certainly number one offense with Gunner Stockton, when our defense did try to load the box on some of those downs where it was like third and short, second and short, and we had one-on-one on the outside, it was like an auto check every single time where we were just, all right, we're going to throw it up to Colby Young. All right, we're going to throw it up to C.J. Wiley. All right, we're going to throw it up to Noah Thomas. All right, we're going to throw a slot fade to Zachariah Branch. All right, we're going to throw a slot fade to Jeremy Bell. We have a number of dudes out there, and it looks like we are making a concerted effort. All right, when we get one-on-one, because last year we'd get the one-on-one, we couldn't make them pay. This year, it looks like, all right, when we get that, yeah, we're going to make them pay. We're going to take those shots. We have a quarterback that can do it, and we have receivers that can go up and win those 50-50 balls. So I think there's a real shot, guys, and I'm going to make that prediction. Gunner leads the SEC in yards per passing attempt. All right, next up here, number 6. So about this time last year, when I went to a fall camp practice, I came back here and did a video telling you guys everything I saw. And like the first thing out of my mouth was, Nate Frazier is a dude. He was the guy that flashed me more than anybody out there. So I was telling you guys before the season even started, this dude's going to play. He's going to play a lot. He's going to be awesome for Georgia. And he had his ups and downs, but he did end up leading Georgia in rushing last year. Certainly has some room for improvement. He knows that. Kirby knows that. But the tools are there. Was he a little raw last year? Yeah. There's some things he need to clean up in his game. Certainly like who you're reading on a given play, like which linebacker you're reading on duo, for example, right? I think a little bit of patience in the hole, letting his block set up. I think those are things he can work on. But physically, the guy's there. He's got explosiveness. He's got twitch. He's got shiftiness. He will put his shoulder down and run through you. I'm a believer in Nate Frazier. So my prediction here is that Nate Frazier will be Georgia's first 1,000-yard rusher since 2019. That's crazy, man. Honestly, I knew it'd been a minute. I didn't realize it'd been that long. I went back and looked at the numbers. We've gone 5 consecutive seasons, guys, without a 1,000-yard rusher. Kenny McIntosh got pretty close back in 2022, but he didn't get there, right? So, we like to rotate running backs. That's become popular all over college football. But it's been a minute since we've had a 1,000-yard rusher. But I think Nate Frazier changes that this year. And look, I know that we do have more depth in our running back room. Like, I like Josh McCray, bringing over Illinois' leading rusher from a year ago. I love Bo Walker. Bo's going to get some carries. Bo's going to do great things for us this year. Chauncey Bowens had a great G-Day. He had a great first fall scrimmage. He's doing good things, right? You got Cash Jones back there. We have a number of guys. Rod Robinson's back in the mix. We'll see what happens there. So we've got guys, and we've got a number of players that are going to get real carries in games. So it's not going to be the Nate Frazier show where he's getting 25, 30 snaps a game, or carries a game. Maybe snaps, maybe not carries, right? I'm aware of that. But I still am convinced. I know that Nate Frazier is going to be our lead back, okay? Like ETN would have gone for over 1,000 last year, guys, probably, if he hadn't missed like 5 games, right? And we've had some injuries at the running back position. We go back to 2023. You had Dejan Edwards miss the first couple games, and he wasn't fully healthy. Kendall Milton was banged up for a couple of years. That certainly limited our ability to have a 1,000-yard rusher. But if Nate can stay healthy this year, I think he breaks that drought for Georgia and we get 1,000-yard rusher. Now, is he going to lead the SEC in rushing? Probably not, because we do have some other guys that we're going to rotate in there. But I do believe that Nate will be Georgia's featured back, and I do believe that Nate is going to produce at a high low for Georgia. And a part of that is, going back to what I said with the last prediction, we're going to try to get back to our roots offensively and run the freaking football. And I also believe that Gunner Stockton's presence and his ability to run the football, posing a threat to do that, defense have to account for that. So what does that do? That opens up room for our running back in a way they just didn't have last year. How many times do you have unblocked defenders making them play on the running back? In the hole, what can you do with that? You guys unblocked, right? Yeah, you want to make a miss, but can you do that every single time? That's tough, man. Now we're going to be able to option off backside ends, front side ends. We're going to be able to do that to occupy these players without actually having to dedicate a blocker to them. That's going to open up a lot of room, guys. I've been very jealous of that for the past couple of years, watching other teams do that. We haven't been able to with Carson Beck. That changes this year, and that will make our running game and backside Frazier even more effective. So I do think Nate Frazier over 1,000 yards this year for the Dogs. All right, coming in number 7. This is my last getting bolder prediction. Georgia will finish inside the top 3 in the SEC in yards per play offense. Now, I know that a lot of you are going to not agree with me on that. After how I got lit up in the comments by the Bobo haters out there with what I said about the Georgia offense taking a step forward this year in the last episode. Hey, I knew it was coming. Like I said in the episode, there's nothing I can say. There's no stats I can throw out there to convince the people that don't like Mike Bobo and think he sucks, that he doesn't suck. I'll never be able to, right? I just never will be able to. Because what I always get is, well, how many championships has he won? Well, his job is to call plays. His job is to produce offensively. He doesn't coach defense. Is it Mike Bobo's fault that he didn't have a generational defense to work with like Todd Monken did? Because what Mike Bobo produced in 2023 was every bit as good was better than both the first years of Todd Monken and just like a hair behind Todd Monken in 2022. but he didn't have that caliber of a defense. So neither here nor there. All right. I just know that people aren't going to agree with this, which is fine. But I believe in this. That's why it's my prediction. So if you look at Georgia's offensive production from a yards per play standpoint, now I'm using yards per play, guys, because that's a far more important stat to me than like the raw like total offense, because that's dependent on like tempo, how many plays you run, and Georgia doesn't run a high tempo, so we're not going to lead the SEC in yards per game. We're just not, because we don't run plays like that. We're going to run the football. We're going to chew clock. That's what we're going to do, right? But yards per play from an efficiency standpoint, over the past prior to last year, for 3 or 4 years prior to that, we had been one of the more efficient offenses in the SEC. Every single year. You go back to 2021, 6.98 yards per play. It was top 3. 2022, 7.17 yards per play, which was the greatest offense in Georgia history under Todd Monken. In 2023, Mike Bobo, I know, incoming, I'm ducking, all right, ducking for cover. Mike Bobo put up 7.26 yards per play. That is the single highest yards per play output in the history of Georgia football. That's kind of what the guy's paid to do, right? So, just saying that. But yeah, I will admit, 2024 sucked. It wasn't good enough. And Bobo certainly bears culpability for that. He's the coordinator, right? There were some extenuating circumstances. I will certainly continue to maintain that. Injuries and quarterback just, I don't even know how to explain what happened to Carson Beck last year. I still can't quite explain that. But we went from 7.26 yards per play in 23 to 6.03 last year. Whoa, that's a drop-off, right? But the fact remains, we have evidence that Mike Bobo can coordinate an elite offense. It wasn't last year. That was a failure. I'm not trying to make excuses for last year. Like, that was a failure. I do think there were some things that he didn't have control over, but the job didn't get done last year, right? But we know he can do it. It was just a year prior to that, 7.26, the most yards per play in the history of Georgia football, okay? And I think this year, as I kind of talked about already with some of these predictions, I just think we're going to be a lot better offensively. I already went over that in the last episode, so I don't want to dive too much into that and waste your time. You can go back and check that episode out. I dove into exactly why I think the Georgia offense is going to see a resurgence in 2025. I know not everyone agrees. That's fine, okay? I can respect that. But I believe it, and you can go check that episode out. But if you look at last year's numbers, okay, the team that was third in the SEC in yards per play finished with 6.58 yards per play. If we are in that range, we should have a legit shot to finish inside the top 3. And I absolutely believe that we'll be there. I don't think there's anywhere we finish like near 6 yards per play like last year. Will it be 7.26? Probably not. We're probably not going to break a Georgia record. But I think we're going to be pushing closer to 7 than we are pushing closer to 6 this year. With the explosive weapons we have on the outside, with the quarterback that we have that can push the ball down the field, we're going to have an improved run game, which will allow us to have more opportunities one-on-one on the outside. I just think we have all the ingredients, the recipe there to be more explosive on offense, right? So from a per-play standpoint, efficiency standpoint, I think Georgia takes a massive step forward and finishes inside the top 3 in the SEC in yards per play offense. All right, so that wraps up my getting bolder category. Last up here, these are my legit bold takes. Okay, bear with me here. Bear with me, all right? Now, this is where we're getting like, all right, I'm not as confident in these happening, but I don't think these are like wildly outlandish and have no chance happening. I'm not trying to compete with somebody else out there saying, look, my take's more outlandish and crazier than yours. These are things I do believe have a legit shot to happen. They're just less likely, I guess. So coming in number 8, I got Elo Madozie. Newcomer, edge player, jack linebacker from Army, will accumulate more sacks in 2025 than any player has in a single year in the Kirby Smart era. So what does that mean? How many sacks does he need to make that prediction come true? He needs 9, because the high point in the Kirby Smart era for sacks in a single year was Azeez Ojulari in 2020, the COVID year, 8.5. Now that was the full year Azeez would have gone double digits. He was a dude in 2020. That guy was a nightmare for opposing offenses. 8.5, though, is the number. DeAndre Walker, we're talking about full seasons, DeAndre Walker, 7.5 in 2018. Jalen Walker, awesome last year, 6.5. Chaz Chambliss, big year for him, also 6.5, right? So that's what Madozie's got to hit. He's got to hit 9, all right? And I'm not saying he's going to tie it. I'm not saying 8.5. I'm saying he's going to break it. He's going to have more sacks than anybody in a single year in the Kirby Smart era. I've had some questions about his ability to hold up against the run on the edge, like set the edge, because, it's a different level coming from the AAC to, or now they want to be known as the American Conference. There is no more AAC, allegedly. So coming from the American Conference at Army to the SEC, it's a different level of physicality. And so you have questions, you need to see it. But everything I've heard, the feedback I've gotten from people that have been in practice and have seen these things, is that he's playing with some physicality. And Kirby has said that as well. And so I'm not as worried about that. And what I do feel confident with Mendoza is the dude is a dynamic pass rusher. He's got serious twitch to his game, guys. Off the edge, great bend, explosiveness, a great repertoire of pass rush and counter rush moves. The dude's got the tools to be a dynamic pass rusher in the SEC. And here's the other thing, guys. We don't have a lot of guys at that position this year that we're going to rotate in and out like we did a year ago, right? We lost a lot of guys, okay? You lose Damian Wilson Jr. to transfer. You lose Chaz Chambliss going to the NFL, right? You lose Jalen Walker. Michael Williams played over there at times. You lose all those guys. I think situationally, Gabe Harris will play some there this year. Quintavious Johnson's going to get some snaps. But we don't have the number of guys playing that position. So I think he's going to get more snaps at that spot than some of those guys did a year ago. And he is going to be, I'm not going to say a designated pass rusher because I think he's going to play more than third downs. But when he gets opportunities to rush a passer, and he's going to get a lot of them, he's different, guys. He's a different kind of pass rusher. So I'm excited about him. I think he's going to have a ton of opportunities. And if we play as many games as I, fingers crossed, hope that we do this year, I'm going to go Elam Mendoza breaks that record set by Azeez Ojulari in the Kirby Smart era in a single season, which would be 8.5. All right, number 9. Okay, it's pretty bold, I think, but I feel good about this one. Georgia will have at least 3 first-team All-Americans in 2025. Now you're saying, like, whoa. Tyler, who are these All-Americans you're talking about? All right, fair. Let me give you a list of guys that I think have a legit shot to finish as a first-team All-American. I mentioned Dalen Everett. I think the guy is going to have a huge year for Georgia and get into first-round conversation. If that's the case, playing for Georgia, who's going to be one of the top programs in the country this year, in my estimation, that gives you some name recognition. Third year as a starter, some name recognition there. I think Dan Everett's got a legit shot. KJ Bolden, not fully starting as a true freshman, but playing a ton, almost like a co-starter back there in the secondary at safety. Big-time 5-star guy, dramatic recruiting process, right? Florida State, then Georgia, the last second, all that. Played at Buford, all those things. People know who KJ Bolden is. He is a known commodity, kind of like Malachi Starks was coming out of his first year in 2022. And what was Malachi Starks in 2023? Oh, yeah, that's right. A first-team All-American at safety. I think it's KJ Bolden's turn. Feel good about that one. CJ Allen at linebacker's got a shot. The problem for him now is that now when they say linebacker, they're kind of throwing jack linebackers in there as well, which I think it kind of should be its own category. So that makes it tougher. And people are beholden, like people who vote on these things, they're beholden to stats. And jack linebackers who rush the passer, they just put up more stats. They put up more sacks, right? Oh, then he's better. He's got more sacks. Well, the inside linebacker's job is a little bit different, and that's hard for people to judge sometimes. I also think Anthony Hill Jr. at Texas is really, really good, so he's going to be in that mix there. But CJ, going to his second year as a full-time starter, started about half the year-ish as a freshman. This guy's played a lot of football for Georgia. He's gotten better and better and better. He is the leader on the defense, had that on very good authority. We have a lot of leaders, but he is certainly the guy out there. So I think CJ's got a legit shot. Brett Thorson, punter extraordinaire, if he can come back healthy from the ACL, which we don't know, we need to see it, but if he can, it's not like he's out there running. He's kicking, okay? If he can, I mean, that guy was one of the best punters in the country last year. So he's got a legit shot. He's got name recognition. Peyton Woodring as our kicker. Guy's been really good for us. I think he has a legitimate shot. Will he? I don't know, but I think he's got a shot. He'll be in the conversation. Zachariah Branch, maybe not as a receiver, probably not as a receiver, but as a return man, a legitimate shot. Absolutely he does. Elam Mendoza, if he has the kind of year that I think he could, and that we certainly hope he does this year with all the opportunities he's going to get, could he be a first-team All-American kind of guy? If he breaks Georgia's sack record on Kirby Smart, at least in a single season, maybe, yeah, right? If we have a big year and we play all these high-profile games, absolutely he could. What about Christian Miller? I think Christian Miller's awesome. I think he's got a shot to work himself into first-round conversations. I think now that he's going to be kind of the guy, one of the top 2 guys for Georgia at that 3-tech spot, a much more natural position for him. He's an upperclassman now. I think Christian's going to have a monster year, right? And he's been around for a while. Maybe not the known quantity, but if you watch the guy play, and that's the problem. These guys who vote on these things don't always really watch everybody play. They don't always know what they're looking for, especially a position like tackle where it's not a stat-driven position. You actually have to really know what you're watching for. It makes it tougher, but I think Christian Miller's going to have a big year. So probably not likely there with him, but he's got a shot. So all I need is 3. I need 3 of those guys, and I think that's going to happen, guys. So Georgia, at least 3 first-team All-Americans in 2025. And finally, maybe the boldest one here, but I think this is a very realistic thing, guys. Number 10, Georgia will beat Texas twice again in 2025. I believe it, guys. I believe that we're going to beat them here in Athens, right? Texas is really good. Arch, man, I think is going to be a good quarterback. Playing in Athens is a little bit different, man. We went in there and punked them at their own stadium. They're going to want revenge, of course, and they're really good. They're going to be a major challenge. But kind of like Alabama has our number, seems like we kind of have Texas's number. Is that a little bit in their head? Like clearly Alabama program is in our head? Yeah, I think it certainly could be. And look, our schedule is tough, all right? So if we're going to beat them twice, it likely would be in the regular season here in Athens and probably in the SEC championship game. Could it also be in the college football playoff? Yeah, potentially. Could be, right? But I'm going to say right now it's in the regular season in the SEC title game. Our schedule's tough, right? It's going to be tough for us to get in the SEC title game again. But I do think our schedule, while it's tough, is more manageable than last year's when now those 3 crazy like top 10 caliber road games we had last year, they're now all at home. I do think that Auburn will be a bigger challenge this year on the road at night. That's going to be tough. Tennessee's on the road. I don't think Tennessee's going to be as good this year. Tech's a good football team. They're losing Eric Singleton. And yeah, it's not in Athens, but it's not at Tech. It's at a neutral site. And there'll be more Georgia fans there. So, and Tech's going to have our attention. They're going to catch us by surprise like they did a year ago. So, and that doesn't even matter for the SEC anyway. But I do think our schedule is more manageable than last year's. Florida will be a little bit better. We'll see if DJ Lagway is actually healthy by that game. Who knows? But I believe that we are going to get to the SEC championship game this year. Now, that's kind of spoiler alert there. I'm going to do my predictions, my game-by-game predictions here in a couple of weeks. But I do think that we're going to get to the SEC championship. It doesn't mean we're going to defeat it, but I think we're going to get there, right? Because I think we're going to run the football better as I've laid out. I think we have significantly more weapons. I think we're going to be more explosive on offense. Yeah, we lost some talent on defense, but we're still loaded on that side of the ball. Plenty of returning veterans that have played a lot of football for Georgia. We're going to be a really good football team this year. And then if you look at Texas' schedule, it's a freaking joke. Like I told you guys, they're going to play 4 teams I think have a legitimate shot to finish as the 4 worst teams in the SEC. Some way, somehow, they got a schedule where they play Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, and Kentucky. All 4 of them? All 4 of them? I mean, yeah, okay, they play on the road at Georgia. Okay, they go to Florida. Okay, tough spot, right? What other game are they going to possibly lose? Maybe the Red River rivalry? Maybe Oklahoma, maybe. I think there's 3 losable games for them on their schedule. Maybe 4 if you say A&M, but they get A&M at home, right? But are they going to lose all 3 of those games? No, I don't think so. I think that Texas probably ends up going 11-1, 10-2 probably at worst in the SEC this year. Maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe Arch just face plants, maybe. But I'm going to say Texas in the SEC title game against Georgia. Rematch of last year. Georgia gets them again in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So that's my boldest take. I think that's my boldest prediction. But again, I don't think that's wild. That's very realistic. And I mean, relatively speaking to some of the other bold predictions that you see out there. But all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Those are my 10 bold predictions. Let me know what you guys think. What are your bold predictions? Am I crazy? Did I not go bold enough? Did I go too bold? What are your thoughts there? Which of these are most likely to happen? Hit me up in the comments, guys. I would love to hear from you. Even you Bobo haters who lit me up last week. I know. Come at me again. You probably will. I know you're probably typing away right now. But thank you guys again for being here. I really do appreciate all you Georgia diehards. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, like, comment, all that. Thank you guys. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.